Yeah, my friend in high school.
But they can't, because everything is seen through the lens of white supremacy, right? Like we're all affected by it. Yeah. And so they can't, because their lens of a BIPOC is going to be filtered through white supremacy. That is why they can't write for us. That is why they've had so many problems writing for us. That is why Black Twitter rips them apart for writing for us. And it has to do with dismantling white supremacy. And I'm not saying that we don't, as BIPOC, have to do the same work, but our work is very, very different, right? Our work is picking out this idea of perfectionism and all of those types of things from our, there can only be one, the Highlander syndrome. Those are the kind of things we need to pick out of our brain. Yeah. It's very different what they need to pick out of theirs. Yeah. So I say, like, and I know for Hollywood, they're like, hey, Cheryl, can you keep quiet? I'm like, no, because I know I can produce for anybody white. All the BIPOC directors I know can direct white people all goddamn day. Every DP that I know who is a person of color, every last single one of them can like white people. White people cannot always like Black people or Asian people, or let alone having a bunch of us in the same scene, right? Like this is not something that they learned because they did not have to. So it's really, I say everybody else needs to go away and we just need to hire BIPOC across the board for everything.
It was interesting for me. I was just looking, because I'm older than Andrew, so it's I grew up in the heart of supremacy. And it's interesting for me, I was just researching, what's his name? Perry's, not invasion, but attack on Japan with 4 gunboats, right, in the 1800s. And it was essentially a version of Pearl Harbor much earlier. So I remember reading about it when I was younger, and the storyline was all about white supremacy, Asian inferiority, the cowering Asian. And now I'm looking at the Wikipedia version of that story now, and it's trying to sanitize the story that I learned, but still staying structurally within the same narrative. So I was just like, you can't, like, white folk, it's like you can't manage the stories. We're not going to let you. And guess what kind of stories we're writing?
Well, but
we'll also look at, I think it's also incumbent on us to look at, to ensure that we don't go down the same hole of writing narratives that are, I'm not saying don't write fiction, but narratives that are so fictional and self-aggrandizing that we don't represent ourselves truly.
I think that narrative not only has been happening against Asians, throughout American history, but also it's been encouraged by the former president. And this is why we have so much anti-Asian hate and violence. And I know, Bobby, that you've
this is my segment.
This is Bobby's.
My grandparents are from China. I'm stepping up. Okay, I'm in.
Cheryl, jump in anytime.
I know, yeah, feel free
Bobby's
to
voice.
all I'm going to say is this, that the largest diversity, equity, and inclusion program ever created in Hollywood was created by a Vietnamese American woman and an African American woman. That would be Taupe and myself, right?
There you go.
And Taupe used to say all the time, she's like, Black power, yellow peril.
Yeah.
We have always been so incredibly inclusive. And having, now over 3,500 members. But I've been dealing with this all along. I don't care whether it's Black Lives Matter or Latinx kids in cages or my Asian members being spit on or harassed or it was actually one of my members. I don't know if you guys remember the Facebook post about the Black woman who was just sitting under a tree at a church and was harassed. That was one of my members. So I've been, we as a community, not just me, all my members, we as a community have been dealing with all of these issues. Indigenous women who go missing.
That's huge here.
We talk about all of it, right? And it's interesting that you know the world is sort of looking at this, but we know in all of our communities these are things that we have always talked about.